We're continuing our look into the next frontier. With ambitious new space exploration and tourism programs underway, what's really possible? Joining us now is Jeffrey Hoffman. He's a former NASA astronaut who flew on 5 space shuttle missions, including the initial rescue and repair of the Hubble Space Telescope. He's currently a professor of aerospace engineering at MIT's Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And still with us, Joe Palaia with 4Frontiers, the company ambitiously planning for a human settlement on Mars within the next 20 years. Let me start with you. You've been up there several times.
I have. I've been very fortunate.
And recently, even the head of NASA has even said, and looking back, maybe NASA hasn't quite gone the way it should have been. Maybe the International Space Station wasn't quite the right direction. The Bush administration and NASA kind of setting a new agenda for space exploration and spacecraft. How do you feel that we're going in the right direction and what you see in the years to come?
I was a student when we landed on the moon. I was full of enthusiasm. Everybody who loved space was full of enthusiasm. When you go back and look at the history of the time, there were grandiose plans. I mean, don't get the idea that NASA chose to abandon space exploration. There was a change in administration. The Nixon administration came in, had really no interest in space. It was seen as a legacy of the Kennedy years. And they basically told NASA, no trips to Mars. At the time, they even said no space station. They were interested enough in the aerospace industry in California and a couple of other big electoral states. Remember, there was an election in 1972 that they told NASA, you go ahead, you can build this new space shuttle that you'd like to do. And it was really, there was a lot of politics in all that. NASA was really pushed into giving up space exploration, and unfortunately, it's taken a long time to get back.
And now there's kind of been a new rededication to new spacecraft. We're not going to be seeing the old typical shuttles. They're kind of looking at new models. How do you feel about kind of the future of building some of these new different spacecraft, and what sort of options it opens up?
I mean, it's interesting that you talk about new spacecraft, because it's like Yogi Berra's deja vu all over again. Because,
right.
You know, you're gonna see pictures of this new crew exploration vehicle, which NASA is talking about, but it looks like a slightly larger version of Apollo capsule,
right,
because it's basically designed to do what the Apollo capsule was able to do, which is leave the Earth. It can go into Earth orbit, sure, but it can also go farther to the moon. And frankly, when you're going to the moon, you don't need wings. And so we don't need the shuttle. The shuttle was built to go into Earth orbit, period.
So, Joe, how do companies like yours kind of take advantage of or hope to cooperate with new developments that the government does as space exploration evolves?
Well, we're hoping that there's going to be many opportunities for private industry to get involved in this. And I think that with Mike Griffin, I think he's really focusing the agency on getting commercial efforts involved more, which is great. We view many of the development tasks that we need to do for this Mars settlement. Some of the technology is also applicable to, say, lunar development. So we're looking at, for instance, with the Centennial Challenges, I believe 4Frontiers is we're considering right now going after this this latest prize. What is it, a lunar regolith extractor? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's one area where we may take part.
Actually building an autonomous vehicle that can go and actually dig up large amounts of soil from the surface of the moon.
How realistic do you think are Mars settlements like this, and more trips to the moon, and going beyond just, you know, astronauts, almost commercializing it or letting humans take this sort of path?
In some ways, Mars is easier to live on than the moon, because it actually has a very thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide, which you can use for chemical processing. We believe that it has rather large quantities of water, although we still have to find out exactly where that is. Whereas the moon, it truly is dead. Now, there are certain materials you can get to use on the moon, but the hard part about Mars is getting there. I mean, it's a long way away, and if you have any problems, you can't just come back in a few days like you can from the moon. And because of that, it initially will be a lot more expensive to get there. But if we can get there with sufficient material and sufficient technology that we can establish a beachhead and demonstrate that it's possible to live on Mars and live off the land, then I think there's likely to be a large following, because there are many people who would be challenged to go and live there.
And I think that there's this fascination, too, with Mars, which I haven't experienced so much with the moon. something about Mars has always captivated mankind. And, you know, us here at 4Frontiers, we're really hoping to capitalize on that interest.
Yeah, you can tell. My Favorite Martian was one of my favorite shows, and you can tell there's kind of a fascination with it. But from your experience, you've been up there 5 times. Do you really think that other humans, average Joes, one day may actually be able to have that experience?
Well, I sure hope so. It's a transforming experience. You can partly share in that if you go to one of the Space IMAX movies. They're great, and I certainly recommend that. It's about as close as you can come without being there. But to actually be in a sense, to have the sensation where you're floating, where you can look out and the whole Earth is out there outside your window. I think that once we have the ability to send people into space at a reasonable cost and a reasonable risk, whatever those turn out to be, and the first tourists come back with their traveler's tales, you're not going to be able to keep people away.
Yeah, when we can bring it down from $20 million, right? Isn't that what
right.
a private trip is right now?
Yeah, and I don't look at that as real tourism.
No,
I mean,
right.
But it can happen. I mean, you look at the interest in the X Prize that was just won last year, and people really responded to that.
Well, we're going to continue talking about that when we come back, how more and more opportunities are opening up so people can head into space. Stay with us.